Hello, I'm Kats, and welcome to today's video. So today we're going to be discussing my fusion plan for getting the latest fusion in the game and the anniversary fusion for the 7th anniversary of Raid, Pelops the Victor here. So we have a traditional style fusion. So we get to collect 16 rares, fuse them into 4 magic epics, and then fuse those into the desired champion here, Pelops the Victor. And I guess we should also mention that this is the official launch of the fusion swapping token trader system going on here. So if we click on change champion, you can see here that this is officially live. Obviously we're not going to be able to use this at least for 1 fusion, but up to 3 traditional and or hybrid style fusions. But yeah, as a quick aside, let me know your guys' opinions on this system. I think it's good on behalf of majority of the player base who are fairly used to skipping fusions or would be more willing to kind of trash, but air quotes, bad fusions and whatnot. But for me personally, I don't like it just because I don't like the fact that you have to trade the champion, the existing champion, fusion champion, for one of the ones from the past, because I would want the new champion. That's me personally, just because I do every fusion basically, as you can see here, that my options are pretty sparse when it comes to what is available. So you have a couple that are like legacy champions from way back before I even started playing. A couple, maybe like 3 of them are from when I wasn't playing. I took a little break from the game, and then a couple of them were ones that I just missed because of errors on my part. But yeah, I don't have that many from the past that I'd really want anyways, and so to me it doesn't really make sense personally to trade one of the newer fusions, which tend to be a lot better than they have been historically in the past. But of course there's always a couple stinkers here and there, but even then the stinkers might get buffed or they might become useful in some future content that we're just unaware of. And so I always like to hedge my bets on banking the newer champions just in case, and hoping that I happen to pull the older ones in the future, which has not yet happened for a Hellcath, my biggest mistake. But anyways, let me know your thoughts on the system. I'm generally positive on behalf of people. I don't think that every single update in the game has to positively affect me personally, right? I'm not one of those people. So as long as a majority of people are happy, I think that's a good change, and that's kind of where the game should operate, generally speaking. But personally, yeah, I'm probably just going to have an infinite number of tokens and just never use them, just because to me, it doesn't feel worth it to trade whatever the newer champion is for one of the ones in the past. But of course, I'm heavily biased by the fact that I have all of the, air quotes, good ones. I have the Fabians and the Newts and the Wixwells and the Tide, all that stuff, the Armands. So I have all of the good ones, so I don't really need many of the ones from the past. And like maybe Kreela would be the only one that I would really want, and that's for like 1 stage of Fire Knight Hard in the Cursed City, where there's an orc restriction and she's the only ally attacker that fits that category. But it's like, am I really going to trade 1 fusion just to do 1 stage of the Cursed City? Probably not. But anyways, I digress. So Pelops the Victor, let's dive into his kit. Let's look in the index just so we can see his total base stats. They have started to fill out to the newest faction in the game, the Argonites, and so he is one of the handful of legendaries that was added in with this most recent patch. But Pelops the Victor, what does he do? He's a legendary spirit affinity HP based champion with a decent amount of HP. Looking at the base stats, 22,000 on the HP, 1,300 on the defense, so pretty tanky overall. Usually the HP based champions, especially if they do damage, have a little bit lower defense, so he's kind of on the higher side. But notably, his speed is a bit on the lower side at 97, and he does not have the extra crit damage you'd expect from someone who's really built to nuke. So, but he does have the a little bit extra resistance. Every champion in the game has a base, at least like legendary plus, as a 30 resistance and then a 10 accuracy from the base of 0. So kind of a good mix of potentially building him with resistance or building him with accuracy. Let's start with the A1 in terms of his kit. He has a single target attack here that has a 75% chance, 100% chance when booked of placing decreased attack for 2 turns, and this debuff cannot be resisted or blocked if the target is under HP burn. Put a pin in that. On the A2, another single target attack will ignore 50% of the target's defense if they're under an HP burn debuff, and then the damage increases for each remaining turn on any debuffs on this champion and the target. So you can get up to quadruple damage, more or less, if the stars align, but that's highly unlikely for you to get it stacked up all that high, especially for him to have 10 debuffs on him. But nonetheless, you can increase the damage. That's kind of the main takeaway. If the damage is less than 50% of the target's max HP, then it will steal all the buffs from the target and stun them for 2 turns. So one of the few champions in the game who can stun a target for 2 turns, and this is on a 3-turn cooldown. So In most cases, you don't build him for damage. You build him just to be as a control slash tank, as we'll see a little bit with the passive. This could just be a 2-turn stun on a particular target on a 3-turn cooldown that potentially can't be resisted if they're under an HP burn. Super solid. Then we have the AoE attack here on the A3, 3-turn cooldown when booked. It places increased attack and a magma shield on all allies for 2 turns, and the magma shield is equal to 30% of his max HP. Again, he is HP based, so you're going to get a decently chunky shield. And for anyone who's unfamiliar, magma shield is a special type of shield that is above and beyond the normal like shield set type shields, where the damage you do to the shield gets reflected back to you in some form, and so you can actually do a lot of damage to enemies just by having that shield out there. However, of course, if they ignore shields with some ability or passive, then this will basically do nothing, so just keep that in mind. And then it will also place a taunt on this champion for 2 turns. Again, this is on a 3-turn cooldown when booked, so he's going to have taunt up a lot of the time, meaning that everyone will be forced to attack him versus anyone else on the team. And of course, it's worth noting that increased attack could be good to set up for a nuker or something like that on your team. And there's this random just passive effect of this active ability, so it will decrease the damage of all allies that they receive by 20% while he's not under decreased defense. So it's not like he has some way to give that to himself. It just means that you're tankier. Your entire team is tankier as long as they're not debuffed with decreased defense, which could be relatively easy to do currently in the heavy buff lightning cage protection meta that we have going on right now, Mercurial and whatnot. So you're just a little bit tankier just by him existing on the team, and it's not and it's independent, thankfully, of this skill being on cooldown like some other champion in the game. Like if they use their ability, then the passive part of the active goes away. Last but not least, we have the passive here, where he is immune to stun, HP burn, and petrification, which is kind of unique because he can't be controlled by his own CC form. So he can't stun himself, thinking of like a wand of submission, and he can't be burned, which we'll get to in a bit, where he can place burns out there, and then he can't be petrified, which again we'll get to with the further down in the passive here. So whenever an enemy attacks him, he has a 100% chance of placing a burn on that enemy for 2 turns, and the chance decreases to 50% if he's under decreased defense. So once again, he's weakened somewhat if you just place decreased defense on him specifically. And then whenever the enemy attacks the champion, at the same time, you also have a 50% chance of placing a petrification debuff on the enemy for 1 turn, and it decreases to 25% chance for the same condition, decreased defense. So basically, he comes up, he puts out a massive shield that will make you take damage if you attack him. He's taunting you, meaning that you're forced to attack him, and when you attack him, you're going to burn yourself at the very least, and you might have a chance to petrify yourself as well. And even if you do have a wand of submission and you try to reflect it back, he is immune to the burn and the petrification, as well as the stun from his own A2. So you can potentially reflect it and prevent it from landing on you, but you cannot really do anything back to him specifically, so he will always be there under the taunt, drawing some aggro. And I think that mostly comes in handy when it comes to petrification, because of course petrification does remove all of the buffs on you, especially or if you don't have block debuffs, that is. And so that would be a really hard counter to him. Just one submission, he petrifies himself, you get rid of all the buffs here, gets rid of the shield and the increased attack and the taunt, and that would be a really hard counter to him. But he's immune to petrification, so his buffs are somewhat protected in that regard. And then last but not least, he has a resistance aura in all battles by 60. So overall, I think this guy is a solid like B+ champion, maybe A-. He's not going to be like super meta or anything, but I think he's a solid champion that you're going to want to have in your quiver when it comes to the Faction Wars Crypt and or future restrictive content coming into the game. So he's not going to be a game changer by any means, but he is a decent form of CC. I kind of think of him as like a soft CC on your team, like a Mithrala Lifebane, where you place the Hex out there, which is a little bit more offensive, but when the enemies attack you, you have a chance to get petrified, which can then become a form of CC. So you get out there, you place the taunt, you make everyone attack him, you get a passive damage from the burn, which again is really strong relative to PvE content, and then you can have a chance to just petrify people and they're forced to attack him, so you can protect other less tanky people on your team potentially. And then of course the 2-turn stun is always going to be useful. Again, on a 3-turn cooldown, it's kind of ridiculous to have potentially a 2-turn stun, especially if you don't build him for damage, which I suspect is probably not worth it to build him for damage. I haven't really seen test server footage on this guy just yet, but his kit reads to me more like a tank than like a DPS. So yeah, I think this guy's pretty awesome. I think he's worth going for, and at the very least, you're definitely going to want to consider now going forward, going for more traditional and or hybrid style fusion, just because that's the only way you can earn these fusion tokens that you can use to get yourself an old champion. So I think that's kind of a nice thing, again, of like a blessing and a curse, right? It's a good thing. It's a good system that it's permanent and you don't have to worry about something temporary that you might miss if you're not playing at the right time. But also keep in mind that anyone who loves to skip fusions, you're going to have to do a lot more fusions than you probably otherwise would have in order to get the tokens to get someone from the past. But then again, you could also think about it as like, well, I only need to do 3 fusions and then I could get my Newt, or I could get my Wixwell, and then I'm kind of good, and then I can go back to my normal habits of skipping stuff. So kind of depends on you and how you want to, what you make of that system. So now, assuming that you do actually want to go for this champion, let's hop over to the lovely spreadsheet, which will of course be linked in the description box down below if you'd like to check out a copy of this for yourself or follow along with the live version. And let's talk a little bit further about some of the details of this particular fusion, what it's going to take to get to this guy on your account. So first things first, we have the pretty standard 4 dungeon split, meaning the 4 core dungeons. There's no event dungeon, of course, it has closed, and so we don't have to worry about that being as part of the fusion. We have 2 classic arena tournaments. We have 1 champion training tournament, champion chase tournament, of course. We have 1 soul gear hunters event, dedicated, I should say. We'll come back to that in a second. 3 gear enhancements, champion training event, no summon rush, but effectively a summon rush because we have a hero's path that has gone live today, and there will be a dedicated free-to-play review of, or breakdown of, that hero's path later today, so stay tuned for that if that is more so what you're looking for from today's content. So in terms of what's worth noting for this particular fusion, it is a traditional fusion. It is the launch of the fusion trade-in system. There is a hero's path here that goes on for 4 days instead of the standard 3 days when it comes to a weekend summon rush, and once again that is effectively the summon rush for the event, but also it's effectively covering the otherwise would have been 2 gear hunters events that typically go along during a fusion. So if we scroll down a little bit, look at some past fusions, it's pretty typical for us to have 3 gear hunters events across the fusion. But with the Nojo fusion, they kind of established, maybe not established a precedent, but they kind of changed it up a little bit to where we have 1 pure gear hunters event, and then the other 2 effectively are covered by a hero's path. And so in this case, we have identical circumstances where there's only 1 pure gear hunters, and we have gear hunters overlapping with the summon rush to create the 4-day hero's path, which is good. 4 days of dungeon divers means that you can offset however many shards you're going to need to pull for that hero's path. The other thing I like to always highlight is the pinch points, i.e. the overlaps between champion training and some sort of dungeon tournament. And so here you can see at the very beginning we're going to have champion training overlapping with Ice Golem and Fire Knight, and then near the middle / end of the fusion we're going to have champion training overlapping with the entirety of the Spider tournament and then a little bit of the Dragon tournament. The good thing about a traditional and/or hybrid style fusion that starts off with the summon rush means that you have a week and a half or so to start collecting some of the fusion champions, i.e. in this case the fusion rares, and then you can take advantage of them during the champion chase, which should be the subsequent weekend, where you can fuse 2 to 3 of the epics, fusion epics, and get yourself a free 700, up to a free 750 points in this case because they're non-void epics. So that is always the good format. So don't rush to fuse your epics immediately if you can help it. Just save them for the champion chase because it's just free points towards that, which makes the milestone for what that event or that tournament, whatever it will be, a little bit easier to achieve. And then really quickly, for anyone who's unfamiliar with the format of the spreadsheet, we do have a lot of information in here. We have all of the dates of the fusion. We have where the shard events are. This is my prediction for these champion chase. I think we're up for, or teed up for 2x Ancients, but I could be wrong. They could always change the schedule on us. We got a CVC coming up. We have all of the dates of the potion keeps when they're open. The most important thing here would be the void keep. If you do need some void potions, albeit the small ones, just to send the rares, but nonetheless you have to consider it because it's only open twice during the course of the fusion, because you could burn yourself very easily if you can't ascend the rares, or you have to spend gems to open the potion keeps or whatever. But anyways, just keep in mind the void potion only, the void keeps only open twice during the fusion, and then that's the only your free opportunity to farm potions as needed ascension potions. And then over here on the right hand side we have all of the milestones for each of the events and tournaments. Anything marked with an asterisk is a predicted value based off historical precedent, and anything marked in parentheses are the resources that I personally spent on those respective events where it is relevant to specify. So as an example, for the Nojo fusion, I pulled 30 voids for the purpose of the fusion for that 2x voids, and then I spent 20 million on this gear enhancement, 22 on the second one, 17 on the third one, and I pulled 7 sacreds for the hero's path portion of or the summon rush aspect of the hero's path. And then at the bottom here, I pointed to this when we're talking about the pinch points, but this is also just a plan of how I plan to spend my energy over the course of the fusion. That's not a prescription for how you should do it, but just some knowledge about how I plan to spend my energy. And I do update this in real time as things change, but this is my initial projection of how I plan to spend my energy each and every day of the ongoing fusion. And then if we flip tabs here, there's a lot of information in this spreadsheet, so feel free to kind of poke around if you are keen. But we do have the fusion potion calculator tab here. So we put Pelops into the top spot here. And so we have the 4 epic magic champions and then the 16 void rare champions, and that equates to these values in terms of the potions that you will need. Popping back in the game, let's talk about some of the current events going on in the game right now. And as I always like to do, let's talk about my supply count at the start of the fusion. Hopefully this will become more useful and or important for people who are more dedicated now to going for fusions in the future. So I always like to take a stock of my supply count at the beginning of fusions and compare it to where they end up at the end. Granted, I am a free-to-play endgame player, so there's a little bit of endgame bias in there in terms of the resources that I have to start and the resources that I have at my disposal. But nonetheless, I think the principles of how much it takes to get a fusion is important to note. So stay tuned for the end of the fusion, where I will post a summary of those deltas on my community tab page in a post. So at the start of the fusion, let's benchmark it at, I believe I was at 424 million before I ran a little bit of Ice Golem this morning at the start of the fusion. There is, of course, that's the first tournament that's gone live. So 424 million. And then on the gems, let's call it 4650, or round down a little bit to the nearest 50. And yeah, haven't spent any gems thus far. So that's a pretty accurate number. In terms of the active events and tournaments, we have, of course, the anniversary path. Once again, I'll be covering this separately in a video later today. So stay tuned for that one, as we'll break that down in terms of, I haven't actually looked at it yet personally, kind of saving my opinions for that video. But obviously we have access to some of the fusion rares and epics and whatnot, as well as probably various other awards. So we have gear enhancement that starts tomorrow. Of course, that's just, spend silver, level up gear, get some rewards. In terms of the tournaments, we do have the Ice Golem tournament that is live. Like I mentioned, I've been farming that already. This morning, I basically used all of the energy from yesterday's reset at the time of this recording, and so I've already basically gotten halfway. I think I also had a couple of energy yielding stages from the Cursed City from, I think, Plagueholm. There were a couple of energy stages that I waited until this morning to farm and thus use that energy towards the fusion. So I'm probably way ahead of most people when it comes to Ice Golem relative to the beginning of the fusion here. I think also my Bazaar reset today just by happenstance. And so I was able to get that 300, an hour ago. I was able to get that 300 energy and use that as well. So lots of energy for free that I've just kind of thrown into Ice Golem already. And then I believe the champion training tournament starts tomorrow. Yes, that is accurate. So not as much going on right now. I think everyone's focus will be on, farming Ice Golem if you're going for the fusion, of course, and then, as much dungeon divers as you can relative to the path, or people are probably already going to be pulling their shards because they just love to dive straight in and be a little bit less min-maxy when it comes to that sort of thing. No shade or shame whatsoever, cough, cough. But nonetheless, that is going to do it for the fusion plan for getting Pelops the victor. Let me know in the comment section down below what your thoughts are on the champion. Do you agree with my grade? Are you going for him? Are you inspired to go for more fusions in general because of the fusion token system that is now live in the game? Let me know your thoughts on the fusion token system, if they differ or if they agree, if you happen to agree with me or if you happen to disagree with me. Let me know. Curious about everyone's takes on that. And then as an added bonus, if you made it this far in the video, then add a smiley face to your comment. That way I know that you're one of the real ones who watches till the end of the videos. What is it called? Viewer retention or whatever? I don't know. I'm not the YouTube statistician guy. But anyways, as always, if you did find this video helpful, then be sure to hit that like button down below. It really does help out the channel. And feel free to hit the subscribe button down below as well, if and only if you're enjoying the content overall on the channel for more content just like this one in the future. Thanks for watching and have a good one.